"He even gets your mother's compass," the attorney crowed while my stepdad smirked and stuffed it into his pocket. My heart crashed. Mom had promised that brass needle would always guide me. Then Carl slid a 10,000 check across the table and hissed, "Take it and disappear, son." That second slap hurt worse than the first. I staggered outside, rain masking my tears, certain everything she left me was gone, but inside my coat hid the real notarized will, which I'd soon shove under his lawyer's nose. Stay with me as I turn his perfect heist inside out. My name is Gregory Allen Morton, and I'm 40 years old. I spend my days auditing Fortune 500 subsidiaries from my modest lakeside condo, where the late autumn drizzle taps steadily against the balcony rail. My mother, Margaret Morton, gave me her brass compass when I was young, saying it would guide good men through fog. My stepfather, Carl Whitaker, a silver-haired real estate magnate she married when I was 22, has been pushing me away from family decisions lately, insisting business stays with businessmen. During our weekly dinners, he flaunts his country club victories while making subtle jabs about my single status. What he doesn't know is that I've backed up all of Mother's documents on a private server, just in case. But let me start from the beginning. The morning of the will reading dawned gray and heavy, exactly 2 weeks after we laid Mother to rest. I straightened my tie in the elevator's brushed steel walls as it climbed to the top floor of Whitaker and Duffy's downtown offices. My reflection looked tired. I hadn't been sleeping well since the funeral. You know that feeling when you walk into a room and immediately sense something's wrong? That's what hit me the moment I stepped into their walnut-paneled boardroom. The air was thick with mahogany polish and expensive aftershave, and Carl was already there, lounging in one of the high-backed leather chairs like he owned the place, which, I suppose, he technically did. Whitaker and Duffy was his firm, after all. "Gregory, right on time," he said, flashing those perfect veneers. The same smile he'd worn at Mother's service while accepting condolences from half of Indianapolis's social register. I nodded stiffly and took a seat across from him. The weight of Mother's compass felt heavy in my suit pocket. I'd brought it for luck, or maybe comfort. Remember how I mentioned she'd given it to me? Well, she'd always promised it would stay mine, along with the lake house and enough of her estate to keep my feet under me, as she put it. Attorney Randall shuffled in precisely at 9, his wire-rimmed glasses catching the morning light. He carried a single cream-colored envelope, which sent the first warning bell ringing in my head. Mother had been meticulous with her paperwork. There should have been folders, not just one sheet. "Shall we begin?" Randall's voice was professionally neutral as he broke the seal. I leaned forward, hands gripping the armrests. Carl just kept smiling. "Last will and testament of Margaret Morton Whitaker," Randall began reading. The familiar legal phrasing washed over me until he reached the critical section. "I hereby bequeath my entire estate, including but not limited to all real property, financial holdings, personal effects, and family heirlooms." My chest tightened. "To my beloved husband, Carl Everett Whitaker." The words hit like a physical blow. I actually felt my body rock back in the chair. "There must be some mistake," I heard myself say. My voice sounded distant, like it belonged to someone else. "Mother always said, 'The document appears properly executed,'" Randall cut in smoothly, sliding the paper across the polished table. "All assets transferred to Mr. Whitaker, including the Lake Washington property, investment accounts, jewelry collection, and personal effects." Personal effects. The compass. My compass. Carl's hand landed on my shoulder, heavy and warm. "I know this must be difficult to process." "Gregory," his tone dripped false sympathy. "Your mother and I discussed this extensively. She wanted to ensure everything was properly managed." I shrugged his hand off and stood so quickly my chair nearly toppled. The room was spinning slightly, and my stomach churned with acid. Without a word, I strode into the corridor, pressing the elevator call button repeatedly, as if that would make it arrive faster. Behind me, I could hear Carl exchanging pleasantries with Randall. The casual tone of their voices made me want to punch something. My phone pinged just as I reached the elevator. A notification from the county court system. Estate of Margaret Morton Whitaker. Probate proceedings commence in 14 days. 2 weeks. 2 weeks until everything. The house where I'd grown up. Mother's carefully tended investments. Even her brass compass. Legally became Carl's property. The elevator chimed. As the doors slid open, footsteps approached behind me. "Welcome to reality, son." Carl's voice was silk smooth, but I caught the curl of satisfaction in his words. I kept my back to him, staring at the elevator's polished interior. My reflection showed a man I barely recognized, pale, shaken, with something dangerous building behind his eyes. That night, I couldn't stay in my condo. The walls felt like they were closing in, mocking me with their emptiness. I drove to Mother's house, still Mother's house in my mind, not Carl's, using my key one last time. The familiar creak of the front door almost broke me. Her home office was exactly as she'd left it, down to the half-empty tea mug on her desk. The scent of lavender lingered in the air. She'd always kept dried sprigs in a crystal bowl by her computer. For a moment, I just stood there, letting memories wash over me. How many times had I perched on the corner of that desk, helping her sort through paperwork while she explained the importance of keeping meticulous records? I sank into her chair, running my fingers along the worn leather armrests. The laptop sat closed on the desk, its silver surface reflecting the dim light from the window. Mother had been particular about her digital security, something I'd inherited from her, along with her love of backup copies and encrypted files. The computer hummed to life, password screen glowing. I typed in her code, a combination of my birthday and the coordinates of our favorite fishing spot on Lake Washington. The desktop appeared, familiar folders neatly arranged. But something caught my eye. A new email icon in her backup folder, one I hadn't seen before. The timestamp made my heart skip. 6:47 a.m. on the morning she died. My hand shook slightly as I clicked the file. Another password prompt appeared, this one using our private encryption key, a system we'd set up years ago for sensitive documents. The message opened to reveal a single line. Box 121B holds the truth. Trust the compass. I read it 3 times, adrenaline suddenly coursing through my veins. Box 121B, a safety deposit box, and the compass. My hand instinctively went to my pocket where Mother's brass compass sat heavy against my chest. Without hesitation, I pulled out my phone and dialed Marcus. Despite the late hour, he answered on the second ring. "Greg, everything okay?" His voice was alert, despite the hour. Old Marine habits die hard. "Marcus, I need a favor, a big one." I explained about the email and Box 121B, trying to keep my voice steady. "Can you get me into the vault first thing tomorrow?" There was a pause, then a slow exhale. "You know I'd do anything for you, buddy, but this has to be by the book. Any irregularity with a probated estate safety deposit box, and the courts come down hard." "I understand." I did. Marcus had been drilling banking regulations into my head over fishing trips for years. But this is important. Mother left me a message about this box, specifically today. "All right," he said finally. "Be at the main branch at 7 sharp. I'll handle the access paperwork myself." Relief flooded through me. "Marcus, I owe you." "Save it," he cut in, but I could hear the smile in his voice. "Just bring coffee, the good stuff, not that break room sludge." As I pulled out my planner to write down the bank's address, my phone buzzed with a notification. My stomach dropped as I read the alert. Probate court schedule update. Estate of Margaret Morton Whitaker. Private meeting with C. Whitaker, 9:12 a.m. tomorrow. I looked up at Mother's brass compass sitting on the desk, its face catching the moonlight streaming through the window. The needle swung steadily north, unwavering, just as it had all those years she'd used it to guide us home from our lake adventures. But now, watching its steady tick in the darkness of her office, I felt something cold and heavy settle in my gut. Whatever was in Box 121B, I had to get to it before Carl's meeting. The timing couldn't be coincidence. Nothing about Carl ever was. I grabbed the compass, its familiar weight offering little comfort this time. Mother's words echoed in my head. Trust the compass. But trust it for what? To guide me to the truth, or to help me navigate whatever storm was brewing. The autumn chill bit through my suit as I pulled into First National's side lot just before 7. The bank's granite facade loomed dark against the pewter sky, its windows still sleeping behind security screens. I touched Mother's compass in my pocket, drawing strength from its solid brass weight. Marcus's tall figure materialized from the morning haze, keycard already in hand. Even at this hour, he maintained that ramrod-straight Marine posture, though I caught the slight favor in his left leg. An old service reminder that never quite healed, right? "Got your coffee?" I said, holding up the carrier from Monarch's. "Extra shot, black as your soul." He managed a tight smile, accepting the cup. "Might need something stronger before we're done." The words carried a weight that made my stomach clench. The bank's interior felt hollow, our footsteps echoing off marble as Marcus led me past the teller stations. The vault area lay deep in the building's heart, behind 3 separate security doors. Each click and hiss of the locks releasing felt like time slipping away. "Box 121B is down this row," Marcus said, his flashlight beam cutting through the dim vault lighting. We rounded the corner of steel deposit boxes, and my heart stopped. There, centered on box 121B's door, glared a bright red sticker bearing the court's seal. The sight hit like a physical blow. "No," I breathed. "When?" Marcus checked his tablet. "Injunction filed yesterday at 4:47 p.m. Carl's lawyers moved fast. He tapped the screen, bringing up the order. "Only way to break this seal is through formal audit channels or direct judicial override." The vault's climate control hummed mockingly as I processed this. My breath fogged in the chilled air while memories of Mother's final email burned in my mind. Box 121B holds the truth, but Carl had locked that truth away behind legal steel. "There's more," Marcus said, his voice carrying that careful tone he used when delivering bad news to valued clients. "Judge Halperin scheduled the final asset transfer hearing, 14 days from today, 9 a.m. sharp. Once those assets transfer..." He didn't need to finish. How much wiggle room on that deadline? None. Halperin's retiring next month. He's clearing his docket. No extensions, no exceptions. I pressed my palm against the cold metal of box 121B, feeling the texture of that damned red seal under my fingers. Carl had outmaneuvered us completely. He controlled both the key to the truth and the clock it needed to matter. "Come on," Marcus said, guiding me back through the vault. "Let's talk options in my office." His corner office offered some refuge, its glass walls letting in the strengthening dawn. I sank into one of his leather guest chairs while he pulled up relevant regulations on his dual monitors. "Okay, here's what I'm thinking," he said, swiveling to face me. "We petition for an emergency audit based on suspected irregularities. It's thin, but it might buy us access to the box contents." The plan felt fragile, barely more than procedure and hope. But surrender meant watching Carl strip away everything Mother had built. Everything she'd promised would guide my future. The compass seemed to grow heavier in my pocket. A sharp knock interrupted my thoughts. One of the security guards, Jim, I think his name was, stood at Marcus's door with a fresh stack of notices. "Sorry to interrupt, sir," he said, "but you needed to see these right away, especially this one." He handed Marcus a yellow form that made my friend's jaw tighten. "What now?" I asked, though part of me didn't want to know. Marcus set his coffee down carefully. "Carl's frozen all payment arrangements on your mother's accounts, including the safe deposit box rental fees. If those fees lapse..." He met my eyes. "The bank's required to start forfeiture proceedings." My fingers closed around the compass, its edges pressing into my palm. Carl wasn't just blocking access to the box. He was trying to make it disappear entirely. I could almost hear his voice. "Welcome to reality, son." The morning sun finally broke through the haze outside, sending long shadows across Marcus's desk. 14 days. One sealed box, and now a ticking countdown until even the box itself vanished into bank bureaucracy. The afternoon sun slanted through Marcus's office windows as he attacked his keyboard. Regulatory manuals spread across his desk like battle maps. I'd never seen him this focused, not even during our marathon fishing sessions where he'd track weather patterns for hours. "There's always a crack in the wall," he muttered, more to himself than me. "Just gotta find the right pressure point." I nursed my third coffee, trying to ignore how my hands shook. The compass sat heavy in my pocket, its weight a constant reminder of everything at stake. Mother's voice echoed in my head. Trust the compass. But trust wasn't getting us past that red seal. Hold up. Marcus's chair creaked as he leaned forward. Section 7.4.3, subsection B, Internal Audit Protocols. His finger traced down the screen. Greg, come look at this. I moved behind his desk, squinting at the dense text. The legal language made my eyes blur until Marcus highlighted one passage. Management may initiate immediate internal review of any safety deposit content suspected to contain documents materially affecting bank liability or regulatory compliance. In English, I asked. Marcus's grin had that predatory edge I remembered from poker nights. So if we can show reasonable cause to believe Box 121B holds something that could impact the bank's legal position, financial instruments, unsigned contracts, whatever, I can trigger an internal audit. No owner permission needed. The first real hope in days surged through my chest. Carl can't block it. Not if we document proper cause. But Marcus's expression sobered. Board has to vote on it tomorrow at 8 a.m. We need supporting evidence within 48 hours, or the audit gets killed and we lose our shot. I checked my watch. 2:47 p.m. What kind of evidence? Account records, transaction histories, anything suggesting financial documents in that box. Your mother's digital files might have something. The mention of mother's files sparked a memory. She kept everything backed up to her cloud account. I've got admin access. Start digging. Marcus was already drafting the audit request. I'll work the regulatory angles. Meet back here at 7 tomorrow. I grabbed my jacket, already planning my search strategy. The drive home felt endless, every red light an eternity. My hands were trembling again as I logged into Mother's cloud storage. The file structure was pure accountant. Meticulous folders nested within folders, everything tagged and dated. I started with the most recent year, scanning for anything related to Box 121B or bank documents. Hours blurred. My eyes burned from staring at the screen. Coffee went cold beside me. Then, buried in a subfolder labeled Estate Planning 2023, I found it. A series of ledger snapshots titled Compass Fund. Come on, I muttered, opening file after file. The entries showed regular deposits, investment notes, but no bottom-line totals. Just enough to suggest serious money without proving it. Would it be enough for Marcus's board? I started the file transfer to my secure drive, then texted Marcus. Found something. Sending now. His reply came instantly. How big? I checked the folder size. 147 gigabytes. My stomach dropped as I looked at my upload speed. At this rate, it would take hours. Need it all by 7 a.m. latest. Marcus sent. Board's strict on prep time. I glanced at the clock. 11:43 p.m. The progress bar seemed frozen at 12%. Every passing minute felt like watching sand drain through an hourglass. One glitch, one server hiccup, and we'd lose our chance at the box. My phone buzzed again. Marcus, get some sleep. I'll prep what we have. Just make sure those files arrive. Sleep seemed impossible. I set 3 alarms, 5 how, 5:30, 6 cows a.m., and slumped back in my chair, watching the progress bar creep forward. The compass sat on my desk, its brass face catching the blue light from my monitor. Mother's voice whispered again in my memory. Trust the compass. I'm trying, I whispered back. Just keep the servers running. The January sunrise painted First National's windows in watery gold as I paced the 4th floor waiting area. Every time the elevator dinged, my heart jumped, expecting Carl or his lawyers to materialize. But so far, just board members filing in with their morning coffee. Marcus appeared at my elbow, his tie perfectly straight despite the early hour. Ready? I patted my briefcase where the final batch of files had finished transferring at 5:47 a.m. As I'll ever be. The boardroom could have doubled as a museum piece, all dark wood and leather chairs that probably cost more than my car. 9 faces turned our way as Marcus guided me to the presenter's spot. My palms were sweating, but I forced myself to stand straight. You learn a few things about commanding attention after a decade of corporate audits. Ladies and gentlemen, Marcus began, we're requesting an internal audit of Safety Deposit Box 121B under Section 7.483B. He nodded to me. Mr. Morton will present the supporting evidence. I connected my laptop to the projector, bringing up Mother's ledger snapshots. These files detail an investment vehicle called the Compass Fund, documented across multiple years. I advanced through the screenshots, highlighting deposit patterns and annotation references. While exact totals are redacted, the transaction volume suggests significant bank exposure if these instruments remain unverified. A silver-haired woman, Director Chen, according to her nameplate, leaned forward. And you believe these documents are physically stored in Box 121B? Yes, ma'am. I pulled up Mother's encrypted email. This communication explicitly references that box number in relation to estate matters. Murmurs rippled around the table. I caught fragments about liability concerns and fiduciary duty. Marcus stood rock-steady beside me, radiating that quiet Marine Corps confidence that made people listen. The board chairman cleared his throat. We'll proceed to vote. Those in favor of authorizing an internal audit of Box 121B to be conducted under standard documentation protocols. My throat went dry as hands raised one by one. I counted silently. 4, 5. A long pause. Then a sixth hand went up. The chairman nodded. Motion carries. 6-3. Audit scheduled for... He consulted his calendar. Monday next, 9 a.m. sharp. Relief hit me like a wave. 6 days. We'd have access in 6 days. But as Marcus and I stepped into the hallway, my victory crumbled. Carl's attorney, a shark-faced man named Davidson, stood at the clerk's desk, feeding papers into the fax machine. He smiled thinly when he saw us. Ah, Mr. Morton. Just filing a counter motion to revoke that hasty audit approval. The judge should have it within the hour. Ice spread through my chest. I turned to Marcus, who was already checking his phone. Timestamp, he asked the clerk. She glanced at the fax header. 10:47 a.m. Same-day review requested. I felt the compass in my pocket, suddenly heavy as lead. We'd come so close. But Marcus's expression hadn't changed. He waited until we were around the corner before speaking. Don't worry. Policy requires a 5-day buffer period before any counter-motion can nullify an approved audit. By then, we'll already have the box open. You're sure? Section 12.8.1. I checked it 3 times last night. He squeezed my shoulder. The vault date stands. I drove home with my headlights off despite the midday sun, scanning my mirrors for any tail Carl might have set. The small victory felt fragile, like holding smoke. But we had our foot in the door. 6 days to find whatever truth Mother had sealed away. Know what's funny? I kept thinking about those weekly dinners. Carl smugly holding court while Mother watched me suffer his little digs. She must have known even then what kind of man he was. Maybe that's why she'd left that message about the compass, knowing I'd need direction when the storm hit. I parked in my usual spot, but sat there a long moment, watching clouds drift across the winter sky. Carl would be burning up his legal Rolodex right now, hunting for another way to block us. But for the next 5 days at least, that box was our finish line. The compass ticked softly in my pocket, counting down the hours until Monday morning. Monday morning hit like a funeral. Again. Marcus met me at the bank's side entrance, both of us 15 minutes early despite the sleepless night. We didn't speak much. What was there to say? 6 days of hoping, planning, praying, all riding on what lay behind that steel door. The others arrived right at 9. 2 auditors with clipboards and a bank attorney who looked like she'd rather be anywhere else. We followed Marcus through the vault's maze of corridors, our footsteps echoing off marble floors that somehow felt colder than usual. For the record, the lead auditor announced, adjusting his wire-rim glasses, we're proceeding with internal audit number 2024-117 of Safety Deposit Box 121B. He gestured at the security cameras. Time is 9:03 a.m., all parties present. Remember those old westerns where they'd do a drum roll before a hanging? That's what the camera's whirring reminded me of as Marcus inserted his master key. The red court seal crackled as he peeled it away. "Mr. Morton," the bank attorney motioned me forward. "As next of kin, you'll need to verify the contents first." I stepped up, trying to steady my hands. The steel drawer slid out smooth as silk, and right there on top was a small purple sachet, dried lavender, by the smell of it. Underneath lay a stack of old papers. My heart jumped, but as soon as I touched them, I knew. Just childhood drawings done in crayon. Most showed wobbly compasses pointing different directions. "Jesus," Marcus whispered behind me. The lead auditor cleared his throat. "Is there anything else in the box, sir?" I ran my fingers along every corner, every seam. Nothing. No secret compartments, no hidden envelopes, no codicil, no fund statements, no truth mother promised would guide me. "Do another sweep," Marcus ordered, but I barely heard him. The room had started spinning, lavender scent filling my nose as the auditors methodically rechecked the box. You know that moment when hope dies, when you've bet everything on one last chance, and it crumbles in your hands. My knees actually buckled. Marcus caught my elbow, guiding me to a chair I hadn't even noticed was there. "Nothing additional found," the second auditor reported. "Contents are: 1 cloth sachet containing dried lavender, approximately 1 ounce, 8 children's drawings in crayon, dated various years between 1990 and 1993. No financial instruments, no legal documents." The bank attorney began dictating for the cameras. Audit conclusion at 9:17 a.m. Box contents logged and photographed. No items relevant to bank liability discovered. I sat there, numb, as they sealed everything into evidence bags. Had Carl somehow gotten here first? Had I completely misunderstood Mother's message? The compass in my pocket felt like it was burning through my suit. A knock at the vault entrance made us all turn. A courier in brown stood awkwardly in the doorway, holding up an envelope. "Gregory Morton, time-sensitive delivery, sir." Marcus took it, checked the sender, then handed it to me with a grim look. The return address was Carl's law firm. My fingers felt thick as I tore it open. The legal language swam before my eyes, but the key phrases jumped out clear enough. Motion to accelerate estate transfer. Citing absence of contestable evidence. Hearing scheduled in 48 hours. The lavender scent still clung to my suit as I folded the paper, trying to breathe. Carl had won. Whatever Mother meant about Box 121B holding the truth, whatever hints she'd tried to leave me, it was over. In 2 days, everything would belong to him. The house, the accounts, even this damn compass that had led me exactly nowhere. Marcus squeezed my shoulder. "Greg." But I shook my head. What could anyone say? 6 days of hope, shattered by an empty box and a handful of crayon drawings. The cameras whirred on, recording every second of my defeat for the official record. The condo felt emptier than usual that night. I sat at my desk, staring at the resignation letter I'd spent 2 hours crafting. The cursor blinked at me like a judge's gavel, counting down the seconds until I admitted defeat. "Dear Mr. Whitaker," the screen glowed. "I hereby withdraw any challenge to the estate settlement." The words made my stomach turn. Through the sliding glass doors, rain pelted the lake in sheets, drowning out even the hum of my laptop. I remembered summer evenings when Mother and I would sit out there, watching storms roll in while she told stories about my father's adventures as a young accountant. "Numbers don't lie," she'd say, "but people do. That's why good men need true north." Some true north I'd turned out to be. The evidence bag of crayon drawings sat unopened on my coffee table, mocking me. I'd brought them home mostly out of habit. Another failed audit to document. My fridge hummed, empty except for 3 beers and a moldy sandwich. Bills were piling up on the counter. I'd blown through my savings chasing this wild goose chase. What kind of man lets himself get outmaneuvered like this? The kind who still believes in fairy tales about magic compasses and hidden truths, apparently. I grabbed the evidence bag, figuring I should at least file them properly before giving up. The drawings spilled out, crude circles with arrows, mostly, though my 6-year-old self had been pretty consistent about always marking north. One caught my eye. Unlike the others, its arrow pointed northeast, toward what looked like a squiggly building. Something tugged at my memory. But before I could chase it, my inbox chimed. From Randall J. Whitaker and Duffy, LLC. Subject, settlement offer. My hands shook as I opened it. The message was brief, almost insulting in its simplicity. In the interest of family harmony, Mr. Whitaker offers $10,000 compensation for smooth transition of estate assets. Time-sensitive offer requires immediate acceptance. Electronic signature attached. 10 grand. About what Carl probably spent on golf clubs last month. The cursor hovered over accept as I caught my reflection in the compass glass Mother had left me. God, I looked tired, beaten, the kind of man who takes hush money to walk away from his mother's memory. My phone buzzed, another unknown number. I'd been dodging calls all evening, mostly reporters fishing for quotes about the failed audit. This one went to voicemail like the others. I turned back to the settlement offer, finger poised over the mouse. The phone buzzed again. Voicemail notification. Hank Delaney, urgent about your mother. I nearly knocked over my chair. Hank Delaney, Mother's mentor from her early days in probate court. They'd stayed close even after his retirement. He'd been at every holiday dinner until his wife passed last spring. Why would he? The phone lit up again. Same number. This time, I grabbed it before the first ring finished. Mr. Delaney? Gregory? His voice sounded older than I remembered, but still carried that judge's authority. Thank God. I've been trying to reach you all day. My heart hammered against my ribs. On screen, the settlement offer still waited for my answer, but suddenly Carl's blood money felt very far away. I'm here, sir. What's this about my mother? There was a pause, just long enough for hope to flicker dangerously in my chest. When Hank spoke again, his words came carefully, measured like testimony. Your mother and I, we notarized something the night she fell ill. A holographic codicil. I logged it in my personal red ledger. The compass on my desk caught the screen's glow, throwing tiny sparks across my ceiling. I gripped the phone tighter, barely daring to breathe. A codicil. My voice cracked. You mean, there's another will? There was never anything in that safety deposit box, son. Your mother was smarter than that. She knew where Carl would look first. I slumped back in my chair, mind spinning. A codicil? But how? Why didn't you come forward earlier? Gregory, I've been trying to reach you since the funeral. Hank's voice carried that familiar patient tone he'd used when teaching Mother the finer points of estate law. But every time I called your home number, Carl's new assistant said you were unavailable. I finally got your cell from Marcus Bishop this afternoon. Of course, Carl had changed our home phone service right after Mother died, claiming it was more efficient. Just one more thread in his web. The compass caught my eye again, and suddenly, Mother's cryptic email made perfect sense. Box 121B had been a decoy. She'd known Carl would pounce on anything official-looking. The codicil, I pressed, trying to keep my voice steady. What exactly did it say? Your mother was crystal clear. The estate split 70-30 between you and the Children's Hospital, with Carl receiving only what they'd discussed in their prenup. She also specified that family heirlooms, including that compass you're probably fidgeting with right now, go directly to you. My fingers were indeed tracing the compass's worn edges. I pulled them back like I'd touched a hot stove. You saw her sign it. Better, I notarized it myself, right there in my study. Logged it properly in my red ledger with the official stamp and everything. Standard procedure from my bench days. Never trust memory alone in probate matters. The rain had stopped outside, leaving only the soft tick of water dropping from my balcony. Each drop felt like a second rushing past. Where's the ledger now? We need to get it to Judge Halperin before... Hank's sigh cut me off. That's complicated. When Sarah passed last spring, I had to downsize. Most of my legal library went to various collectors. The ledger... He paused, and I could picture him removing his wireframes to polish them, an old habit from particularly thorny cases. I sold it to an antiques dealer over in Millbrook. Specializes in legal memorabilia. My stomach clenched. Can you call them? Get it back? Already tried. Shop's closing tomorrow at noon. Owner's retiring. Everything's being liquidated. But I remember exactly which ledger it is. Red leather, brass corners, my initials stamped in gold on the spine. 2019-2020 volume. I was already grabbing my keys. Text me the address. I'll head over now. At this hour, Gregory, it's nearly midnight. Let's approach this sensibly. The judge in him was showing. Meet me for breakfast at dawn. Rosie's Diner, just off Route 9. We'll strategize properly, then hit the shop when it opens. Carl's played his hand. Now we play ours. He was right, of course. Charging in without a plan was exactly what Carl would expect. I forced myself to set the keys down. Rosie's at dawn. I'll be there. One more thing, Hank added, his voice taking on an almost amused tone. Your stepfather never learned where real records sleep. The line went dead. I sat there for a long moment, staring at my phone, then at the compass, then at Carl's insulting settlement offer still glowing on my screen. With 2 quick clicks, I deleted the email without responding. My hands had stopped shaking. The fog of despair that had clouded my thinking all week was burning away, replaced by something sharper, more focused. I pulled out my planner and wrote down Hank's instructions, the compass rattling slightly against the desk as my pen moved. For the first time since the will reading, I felt my mind clicking into audit mode, assembling facts, analyzing angles, plotting contingencies. Carl had built his house of cards on the assumption I'd fold. He hadn't counted on Mother's old mentor having an ace up his sleeve. I glanced at my watch. 6 hours until dawn. Time to start building our case. I arrived at Rosie's Diner just as the first hint of dawn painted the horizon. The neon "open" sign buzzed against the gray morning, and the smell of fresh coffee hit me before I even pushed through the door. Hank was already settled in a corner booth, his weathered hands wrapped around a steaming mug. Gregory, he nodded, gesturing to the seat across from him. Coffee. Please. My voice came out rougher than intended, the sleepless night catching up with me. The waitress appeared with a fresh cup, but I barely noticed her. My attention was fixed on the manila folder Hank was pulling from his briefcase. He opened it carefully, like handling evidence in court, and slid a photocopied page across the table. Index page from my probate ledger, he explained. I always kept meticulous records. Date, parties involved, type of document, witness signatures. See here? His finger traced down to an entry from last October. Elizabeth Morton Whitaker. Holographic codicil to last will and testament. My hands weren't quite steady as I picked up the page. There it was in black and white. Proof that Mother had made changes to her will. Just as Hank said. The coffee turned bitter in my mouth as I thought about Carl's smug face at the original will reading. This is exactly what we need, I said. Where's the actual ledger? Hank's expression tightened. That's the complicated part. During my downsizing, most of my legal library went to various collectors. The ledger. He paused to sip his coffee. It ended up at Seaside Antiquities, over in Millbrook. Okay, so we'll drive over and... Shop's closing tomorrow at noon. Owner's retiring. Everything's being liquidated. The words hit me like a physical blow. I pulled out my phone, checking the map. Millbrook. That's 4 hours away. And you've got that acceleration hearing first thing tomorrow morning, Hank added grimly. My fingers drummed against the table as I ran calculations. If we leave now... The diner's door chimed, and a gust of wet air swept in. The morning weather report was playing on the mounted TV. Severe coastal storm warning in effect. I was already dialing Marcus before the meteorologist finished speaking. He picked up on the second ring, and I quickly switched to speaker. We've got a situation, I began, but Marcus cut me off. Already talked to Hank. I'm gassing up the SUV now. Better handling than your sedan for weather like this. Relief flooded through me. Trust Marcus to be 3 steps ahead. You don't have to... Save it, he interrupted. I'm not letting you make this run solo. Besides, you'll need a witness when we find that ledger. A crack of thunder punctuated his words. Through the diner's windows, I could see the storm front rolling in. dark clouds bleeding across the sky. "Meet at my place in 20, I said. "I'll grab my—" "Like hell you will." Hank's voice cut through the booth. "My ledger, my responsibility. I'm coming too." I started to protest, but the steel in his eyes stopped me. This wasn't the retired judge speaking. This was the man who'd mentored Mother through law school, who'd been there for her first case, who'd watched me grow up. "My truck's got four-wheel drive," he continued, "and I know exactly what we're looking for." Another thunderclap, closer this time. The diner's lights flickered. "Fine," I conceded, already calculating the new logistics. "But we take Marcus's SUV, no offense, but I've seen your truck." Hank chuckled. "None taken. Let me grab my rain gear from home, and I'll meet you both at your place." 20 minutes later, I was throwing an overnight bag into Marcus's SUV, rain already soaking through my jacket. Hank's pickup rattled into the parking lot, and I helped him transfer his gear. The weather alert on my phone buzzed again. Coastal flooding possible. The windshield wipers were fighting a losing battle against the downpour as we pulled onto the highway. Marcus took the wheel first, his military precision evident in every careful movement. Hank dozed in the back seat, and I kept my eyes locked on the GPS, watching the minutes tick away against the miles remaining. 4 hours to Millbrook, 18 hours until the hearing. One chance to find the ledger before everything Mother had worked for slipped away forever. The compass sat heavy in my pocket as another rumble of thunder chased us down the rain-slicked highway. The night pressed against the SUV's windows like wet velvet. We'd been dodging construction zones and accident-blocked lanes for hours, each detour eating precious minutes we couldn't spare. My phone's weather radar looked like a bruise, all purples and reds swirling over our route. "Radiators running hot," Marcus announced, squinting through the rain-streaked windshield. Sure enough, steam was curling from under Hank's truck's hood just ahead of us. I checked the time, 9:47 p.m. The knot in my stomach tightened. How bad? Bad enough. Marcus guided the SUV onto the shoulder behind Hank's truck, emergency flashers painting the rain orange. "Pop the hood, Judge!" The storm had eased to a steady drizzle, but the wind cut straight through my jacket as we gathered around Hank's engine. Steam hissed between the gaps, carrying that sickly sweet smell of burnt coolant. "Cracked hose," Marcus diagnosed, military efficiency in his movements as he probed the engine with his flashlight. "Might have a spare length of tubing in my kit." A semi roared past, spraying us with road mist. I wiped my glasses, remembering all those summer afternoons when Mother taught me basic car maintenance. "Always carry duct tape," she'd say, "and always know where the nearest service station is." "Ridge Pass gas and go," I said, checking my phone. 24-hour, 2 miles ahead. Marcus nodded. "Better than trying to patch it here. Follow me close. Hank, if that hose goes completely, kill the engine immediately." The gas station's fluorescent glare felt almost surreal after the darkness. While Marcus worked his magic with duct tape and a fresh bottle of antifreeze, I headed inside for coffee. A wall-mounted TV caught my attention, and my blood froze. "Charitable gala hosted by prominent real estate developer Carl Whitaker," the reporter chirped. Whitaker spoke of his plans for the Morton estate, which he'll soon oversee. The camera cut to Carl, resplendent in his favorite navy blazer, raising a champagne flute. "Elizabeth's legacy deserves proper stewardship," he oozed. "I look forward to ensuring her assets serve the community as she would have wanted." My fists clenched. That manipulative bastard was already playing the benevolent widower, while we were out here fighting time and weather just to expose his fraud. The coffee suddenly tasted like ash. "Greg!" Marcus's voice snapped me back. "We're good to go. Temporary fix, but it'll hold." Back on the road, Hank's truck seemed steadier. Lightning still flickered on the horizon, but at least the rain had settled into something manageable. I was just starting to think we might make decent time when Marcus swore. "Rock slide ahead," he growled, braking as red taillights clustered in front of us. Highways completely blocked. It was 11:45 p.m. My GPS recalculated, suggesting a narrow coastal route that hugged the cliffs. The estimated arrival time made me wince. We'd be cutting it desperately close for the hearing. "That back road's treacherous in good weather," Hank warned from the back seat. "But it's our only shot now. I vote we take it." Marcus's grip tightened on the steering wheel. "With all due respect, Judge, that road's a death trap in this storm. One wrong move." They both looked at me. The compass seemed to grow heavier in my pocket as I weighed our options. Stay here and definitely miss our window, or risk the cliff road and maybe make it in time. Mother's voice echoed in my memory. "Sometimes the scariest path is the right one, sweetheart." "We take the detour," I decided. "But Marcus drives. If anyone can handle it, you can." Marcus muttered something that would have made his Marine drill sergeant blush, but he was already signaling Hank and turning onto the access road. The pavement narrowed almost immediately, trees pressing close on our right, while the left side dropped away into darkness. Our headlights carved through thickening fog as we climbed higher. The beams seemed to vanish into the mist just beyond the hood, like the night was swallowing them whole. I could feel the edge of the cliff out there, waiting for any mistake. Mother's compass sat open on my knee, the needle swinging steady despite our winding ascent. Northeast, always northeast, pointing us toward whatever truth waited in that antique shop ledger. If we lived long enough to reach it. First light crept over the coast as we pulled into Seaside Antiquities' gravel lot. My stomach dropped. A closed sign swung lazily in the salt breeze, and 2 moving trucks idled by the loading dock, workers already hauling boxes. No, no, no! I scrambled out before Marcus could fully stop, nearly twisting my ankle on the loose stones. The brass compass bounced against my chest where I'd hung it for luck. An older woman in a paint-splattered apron was directing the movers. Had to be Mrs. Talbot, the owner Marcus had called ahead to warn. I rushed over, probably looking half mad with my rain-soaked suit and wild eyes. "Mrs. Talbot, I'm Greg Morton. We spoke about a red leather ledger." She turned, sympathy creasing her weathered face. "Oh, honey, you just missed it. Collector bought it not 10 minutes ago. Part of a whole lot of vintage office items." The ground seemed to tilt beneath me. Behind me, I heard Hank's uneven footsteps approaching. His breathing labored from our mad dash across town. "Please," I managed. "This is crucial. Which way did they go?" "Headed for the morning ferry." She checked her watch. "If you hurry." I was already running, the compass bouncing wildly. The pier stretched ahead, morning fog still clinging to the wooden planks. Hank's wheezing grew fainter. He couldn't keep up. "There!" Marcus called from behind me. "Guy with the leather satchel." I spotted him. Tall, tweedy academic type, moving with the unhurried confidence of someone who just scored a bargain. The ferry's horn blasted its first warning. "Sir!" I called out, probably too loudly. Several heads turned. "As the red ledger. Please, I need to speak with you." He paused, turning with mild interest that sharpened into calculation when he saw my desperate expression. "Ah, the probate record book. Yes? Mrs. Talbot mentioned someone might come looking." "Yes, please, it's vital. I'll buy it from you." The ferry horn sounded again. The collector glanced at it, then back at me, a slight smile playing at his lips. "Well, I did get quite a deal on it, but considering its apparent importance..." My heart sank. I knew that tone, the sound of someone who just realized they held all the cards. 500, he said smoothly. Cash only. That was at least 4 times what he'd likely paid. But I was already pulling out my wallet, hands shaking as I counted bills. 320, I said hoarsely. "It's all I have on me." The collector's smile didn't waver. "I'm afraid that won't. Plus 200 from me." Marcus appeared at my shoulder, already counting out crisp bills. He shot me a look that said we'd settle up later. The final ferry warning echoed across the pier. The collector checked his watch, then nodded. "Done." I barely breathed as he pulled the ledger from his satchel. The red leather was cracked with age, but there on the cover, I could just make out Mother's initials pressed into the hide. The exchange happened in a blur. Cash for book, just as the ferry's gangplank started to rise. My hands trembled as I opened it. The pages carried that distinctive old book smell that always reminded me of Mother's library. 11:55 a.m. We'd cut it impossibly close. "Here," Hank wheezed, finally catching up. "The notarized entry should be dated." My phone buzzed, the screen lighting up with the judge's office number. My heart stuttered as I read the message. Morton Estate. Evidence deadline moved to 8 a.m. tomorrow. Immediate documentation required. I clutched the ledger tighter, feeling Mother's compass press against my chest. After everything we'd just been through, we still weren't done racing the clock. The drive back was a blur of caffeine and adrenaline. My hands shook so badly I could barely hold the steering wheel. While Marcus navigated and Hank dozed in the back, the precious ledger clutched to his chest. We hit the city limits just after midnight, streetlights gleaming off rain-slicked roads. "First stop, copy shop," Marcus said, checking his watch. 24-hour place on 7th. The fluorescent lights inside the shop made my tired eyes ache. I carefully photographed each relevant page, then made multiple copies while the night clerk watched us suspiciously. The ledger's red leather seemed to glow under the harsh lighting, Mother's initials catching the glare. Remember those late nights when Mother would help me with math homework? The kitchen table spread with papers, her fountain pen scratching away as she showed me how to break down complex problems. That same patient precision showed in her handwriting here, each letter of the codicil formed with deliberate care. "Get some rest," Marcus insisted when we finished. "I'll pick you up at 6. I managed maybe 2 hours of fitful sleep before my alarm blared. The compass sat on my nightstand where I'd placed it, its brass face reflecting the first gray light of dawn. My suit felt like armor as I dressed, every movement mechanical. The courthouse corridors were already humming when we arrived. Early morning light filtered through tall windows, catching dust motes in pale shafts. Legal assistants rushed past with stacks of papers, heels clicking on marble. The air felt charged, like before a storm. "Ready?" Marcus asked quietly. I nodded, though my throat was too tight to speak. Hank stood beside us, looking distinguished despite his rumpled tweed jacket. The ledger's weight in my briefcase felt like lead. Judge Halperin's courtroom was packed. Carl sat in the front row, impeccable in a navy blazer, his country club pin gleaming. He didn't even glance my way. Beside him sat a sharp-featured woman I didn't recognize, her dark bob severe against pale skin. "All rise," the bailiff called. My hands were sweating as I placed the ledger and copies on the evidence table. Hank spoke first, his voice steady as he explained the codicil's creation and his role as notary. I watched the judge's expression, trying to read those impassive features. "Your Honor," I began when my turn came, "this ledger contains clear proof that my mother—" Objection. The woman beside Carl stood, stilettos clicking purposefully as she approached the bench. "Sheila Gray, representing Mr. Whitaker. Your Honor, I have urgent evidence concerning this supposed proof." My stomach clenched. Carl's face remained neutral, but I caught the slight upturn at the corner of his mouth. "Proceed, Mrs. Gray," Judge Halperin said. She produced a sealed envelope. "We had concerns about the convenient timing of this ledger's appearance. Our forensics team analyzed the ink used in the alleged codicil entry." She paused for effect. "The chemical composition dates it to within the last month, long after Mrs. Morton's death." The gallery erupted in whispers. Marcus's hand gripped my shoulder as the room started to spin. "Furthermore," Sheila continued, her voice cutting through the noise, "we move for immediate dismissal and criminal charges for attempting to defraud the court." "That's impossible," Hank burst out, his face flushed. "I witnessed Margaret sign it myself." Judge Halperin raised his hand for silence. "These are serious allegations. Miss Gray, Mr. Morton, do you wish to respond?" I stood, my legs barely supporting me. The compass felt heavy against my chest, its familiar weight now almost mocking. Everything we'd done, the mad dash to the coast, the desperate search, the last-minute rescue of the ledger, all of it undone by a simple chemical test. "Your Honor, I request a brief recess to examine this new evidence and prepare our response." The judge studied me over his reading glasses. 20 minutes. We reconvene at 9:30 sharp. I barely made it to the hallway before my knees gave out. Marcus guided me to a bench while Hank paced, muttering about ink formulas and timestamps. The compass pressed against my sternum as I bent forward, trying to breathe. Its needle swung erratically, as if it too had lost its bearing in this moment of crisis. Mother's voice echoed in my memory. "True north isn't always where you expect, Greg. Sometimes you have to lose your way to find it." The witness room felt like a prison cell. 20 minutes to save everything we'd fought for. Or watch it all crumble. I slumped in a chair while Marcus paced, and Hank was doing something strange. The old judge had upended his leather satchel onto the conference table, muttering as he sorted through a lifetime's worth of legal debris. Papers scattered like autumn leaves, yellowed and crisp with age. "Judge, what are you—" I started. "Quiet, son. Let me think." His liver-spotted hands moved with purpose now, setting aside folders until he reached the bottom. From the depths of the bag, he pulled out 2 items. A brass notary stamp, its wooden handle worn smooth by decades of use, and a small glass bottle sealed with wax. The bottle's label had faded to sepia, but I could just make out Standard Legal Ink, Est, 1990. "The same formula noted in the court records," Hank said, his voice steady. "Never opened it. Kept meaning to, but switched to ballpoints that year. Forgot it was in here." Marcus stopped pacing. "That's great, but they'll just say it proves nothing about when the ledger entry was made." "Check your phone," I told him. "We need documentation, photos, anything from when—" "Hold on." Marcus was already pulling out his ancient flip phone. "Hank, didn't you say you took pictures that night? For the holiday newsletter?" Hank's eyes lit up. "Margaret's last Christmas party. She signed between carols. I remember because she hummed Silent Night while writing. We huddled around the tiny screen as Marcus thumbed through years of stored photos. The resolution was terrible, but there it was. Mother at her desk, pen poised over paper, Hank's notary stamp clearly visible at her elbow. The timestamp glowed in the corner, 2 days before her fall. "This is it," I breathed. "But will it be enough?" "One way to find out." Hank uncorked the ink bottle, its seal cracking like a gunshot in the quiet room. The sharp chemical smell hit me, exactly like the ledger's pages. When we filed back into the courtroom, Carl's smirk hadn't changed. Sheila Gray stood ready, another motion probably hidden in her sleek briefcase. But Hank moved with the quiet confidence I remembered from Mother's stories about his judgeship. "Your Honor," he said, placing his items on the evidence table. "I request permission to demonstrate something." Judge Halperin nodded. "Proceed." Hank held up the bottle. "This is the exact ink formula referenced in your records, unopened since 1990. He displayed the stamp next. "And this is my original notary seal, which I used that night." Sheila's perfect posture stiffened. "Objection, Your Honor. These props prove nothing about—" "If I may," Hank interrupted smoothly, "I suggest an immediate spectrometry test. Compare fresh marks made with this ink against the ledger entry. Science doesn't lie, Mrs. Gray." The judge studied both sides, then pressed his intercom. "Get Dr. Reynolds from the forensics lab. Now." The next 15 minutes stretched like taffy. The forensics expert worked in silence, his machine humming as it analyzed both samples. When he finally looked up, the projector screen behind him told the story in cold, clear data. "The chemical degradation patterns match," he announced. "The ledger entry was indeed made approximately 6 months ago, consistent with the documented date of Mrs. Morton's death." The gallery erupted. Carl's face went from tan to gray in seconds. Sheila Gray's crimson lips pressed into a bloodless line. Judge Halperin raised his gavel. "Order." The crack of wood on wood silenced the room. "Based on this evidence, I find the submitted will invalid and accept the codicil as Mrs. Morton's true final testament." He turned steel eyes on Carl and his attorney. "Furthermore, I am referring both Mr. Whitaker and Miss Gray to the Bar Association for investigation of attempted fraud." The taste of victory filled my mouth, sharp and metallic, like steel after rain. My hand found the compass in my pocket, its weight finally feeling right again. "Mr. Morton," the judge continued, "the estate is yours to administer according to your mother's wishes. Court is adjourned." Carl stormed out, his lawyer rushing after him. Through the windows, I could see reporters already gathering on the courthouse steps. But all I felt was the release of a breath I'd been holding for what felt like years. I'd never seen so many microphones outside our county courthouse. The media scrum hit Carl like a wave the moment he pushed through those heavy brass doors. "You know how sharks can smell blood from miles away?" News crews have the same instinct for scandal. Mr. Whitaker, is it true you attempted to defraud your stepson? What do you say to allegations of document forgery? Will you appeal the judge's ruling? Carl tried his usual charm offensive, that megawatt smile that had won over so many boardrooms. But something had changed. The teeth looked too white, the tan too perfect, like a mask slipping to reveal whatever lived underneath. This is a private family matter that's been grossly misrepresented, he started, but the reporters smelled weakness. Sources say you mocked Gregory Morton at his mother's funeral. Care to comment? Carl's face twitched. I watched from inside Cafe Romano across the street, warming my hands on a coffee mug that had long since gone cold. The drizzle that had followed us for days was finally breaking up, patches of blue peeking through like nature itself wanted a clear view of justice. My phone buzzed, Marcus sending me a link to Crestview Country Club's public statement. I had to read it twice. In light of today's court ruling and evidence of conduct unbecoming a member Ishii, the board has voted unanimously to terminate Mr. Carl Whitaker's membership, effective immediately. Crestview Country Club maintains the highest standards of integrity. Remember those lapel pins he was so proud of? The ones that marked him as club royalty? I imagined him having to turn them in, and a smile tugged at my mouth. Not from spite. Okay, maybe a little spite, but mostly from seeing the scales balance. The cafe's wall-mounted TV flashed breaking news. Whitaker real estate empire faces investor exodus. My coffee sat forgotten as footage rolled of Carl's greatest hits, including a shaky phone video from Mother's funeral that someone had leaked. There he was, drink in hand, telling his golf buddies how I'd never amount to more than a glorified calculator jockey. The clip went viral within hours. Even my most calculator-loving colleagues were sharing it with angry emoji storms. Karma has a way of remembering every slight, doesn't it? Outside, the media frenzy peaked as Sheila Gray emerged. Her crimson heels clicked a rapid retreat down the courthouse steps. But cameras caught her anyway. She'd traded her usual predator's confidence for carefully crafted remorse. As an officer of the court, I deeply regret my role in this matter. She read from a prepared statement. I have already contacted the Bar Association to arrange a full review of my actions. Too little, too late. The headlines were already rolling. Whitaker legacy crumbles. High society fraudster exposed. Prominent attorney faces. Ethics investigation. The rain had stopped completely now. Sunlight caught the courthouse's copper dome, making it glow like a beacon. I watched Carl's Mercedes peel away from the curb, pursued by news vans. His tinted windows couldn't hide the defeat in those squared shoulders. My pulse had finally steadied after days of racing. The coffee was stone cold, but I didn't need it anymore. Everything felt clearer, lighter, except for one last weight in my jacket pocket. Mother's compass pressed against my chest, waiting to go home. I thought of all her sayings about that compass. True north isn't just a direction, Greg. It's a choice we make every day. She'd been right, as usual. Carl had chosen his path, and now he was reaping what he'd sown. His carefully curated image was dissolving like sugar in rain, while the truth stood solid as brass. But watching his downfall didn't feel like victory yet. Not quite. The compass seemed to grow heavier, reminding me it had one more bearing to set before this journey could end. I left a tip on the table and stepped into the freshly washed afternoon. The sky had cleared to a shade of blue I hadn't seen in weeks. The kind that makes you believe in new beginnings. Time to give Mother's compass its proper place, the one she'd always intended for it. The evening sun poured honey gold through my office windows, warming the fresh paint I'd spent the weekend applying. Mother always said a proper workspace needs proper light, and she'd been right about that too. The western exposure caught every sunset just like it was doing now, drawing long shadows across the mahogany desk I'd restored myself. You know that feeling when something's finally exactly where it belongs? That's what hit me as I lifted Mother's compass from its velvet pouch. The brass gleamed like new. I'd spent hours polishing away years of tarnish, each stroke revealing more of the detailed engravings beneath. Our initials caught the light. G, M, plus M, M, simple and eternal. The mounting bracket was already level. I'd checked it 3 times. Some habits you never shake, even when you're not counting other people's money. The compass settled into place with a soft click that seemed to echo through the quiet house. I stepped back, adjusting the angle until the needle aligned perfectly with the view of the lake beyond my window. Remember that little sailboat Mother kept moored out there? The one where she taught me to read wind and water. The compass's needle pointed right to where we used to drop anchor on Sunday afternoons. Back when the world was simpler and true north was whatever direction led to ice cream. Below the compass, I'd hung the framed codicil pages in a neat row. Not to gloat, Mother would have hated that, but to remember. Sometimes the best victories are the quiet ones, the kind that don't need shouting to prove their worth. The doorbell chimed, breaking my reverie. Marcus stood there with a six-pack of the craft beer we'd discovered during one of our late-night strategy sessions. His eyes went straight to the compass, then back to me. No words needed. He just nodded, clinked his bottle against mine, and took a long pull. We stood there a moment, two middle-aged men letting silence say what words couldn't. Then he squeezed my shoulder and headed out, limping slightly from the hours spent driving that rusty truck. Some friends know exactly when you need company, and exactly when you need space. The house settled around me as twilight deepened. I'd plugged in Mother's old diffuser earlier, and now the scent of lavender, the same kind we'd found in box 121B, drifted through the air. Amazing how a simple smell can hold so many memories, isn't it? My phone buzzed on the desk. The bank's notification was brief but powerful. Morton Charitable Fund transfer complete. New trustee, Gregory A. Morton. Another piece clicking into place, another promise kept. Mother had always said wealth was just a tool for doing good. Now I could prove she'd taught me that lesson well. Standing there in the gathering dusk, watching the compass needle hold steady despite the shadows, I felt the weight of these past weeks finally lift. The brass face caught the last rays of sunset, warm and sure as Mother's smile. But something wasn't quite finished. One final task remained, speaking aloud the truth that Compass had been trying to tell me all along. The truth about direction, about legacy, about what makes a man worthy of both. I touched the polished case, feeling the warmth of evening sun stored in its metal. The needle quivered slightly under my finger, as if eager to help find the right words. The next morning hit different. You ever notice how victory feels like sunrise in your bones? I stood on those courthouse steps, the same ones I'd climbed 2 weeks ago with nothing but desperation and a dead mother's compass. Now the morning light caught the brass case in my palm, warm and sure as justice itself. News vans lined the curb like vultures at a feast. But for once, they weren't circling for me. Their cameras pointed at the courthouse doors, waiting for Carl's final walk of shame. I remembered how he used to strut through country club galas, all white teeth and tailored suits, treating everyone like supporting actors in the Carl Whitaker story. Sources confirm a pattern of fraudulent documentation, a reporter announced into her mic, wind-whipping her blazer. The implications for Whitaker Holdings remain unclear, but major investors have already begun distancing themselves. Another journalist picked up the thread. Breaking news. Crestview Country Club Board has voted unanimously to terminate Mr. Whitaker's membership, citing conduct unbecoming. This follows the judge's decision to void the contested will and refer both Whitaker and his attorney for potential disciplinary action. The heavy doors creaked open. Camera flashes erupted like lightning, catching Carl in their merciless glare. Remember how he always seemed 10 feet tall at those family dinners, lecturing me about real business? Now his shoulders slumped beneath his $1,000 suit, legal papers spilled from his unlatched briefcase, dancing around his Italian loafers like autumn leaves. Our eyes met across the marble steps. That tan he'd been so proud of had gone sallow overnight. His perfect veneers disappeared behind pressed lips. For a heartbeat, I saw him as Mother must have in those final months. Not a titan of industry, just a hollow man playing dress-up with other people's lives. The compass felt heavier in my palm, its weight familiar as childhood. I cracked open the lid, letting morning sunlight catch the glass. The needle swung true, just like it had all those years ago when Mother first placed it in my small hands. Some men chase true north their whole lives, she'd said, and never find it. Others carry it in their hearts from the start. Funny how wisdom works. Sometimes you don't understand it until exactly the moment you need it most. A microphone appeared at my elbow. "Mr. Morton, your response to today's developments?" The old me might have ducked away, muttered no comment. But Mother's compass caught the rising sun, reflecting it back like a signal mirror. In that gleam, I saw every Sunday sale, every bedtime story, every quiet lesson about choosing right over easy. I turned toward the camera, feeling the weight of more than brass in my palm. "True north," I said, voice carrying across the sudden hush, "is written in deeds." The compass clicked shut with a sound like destiny finding its mark. Behind me, car doors slammed, Carl making his retreat. But I didn't turn to watch. Some chapters need to end looking forward, not back. Paparazzi flashes caught the polished brass one last time, turning it into a beacon. From the corner of my eye, I saw the footage rolling live across network feeds. But the real audience, she'd been watching all along, hadn't she? Through every twist and turn, every dark night and desperate plan. The compass nestled in my palm, warm as a promise kept. Mother had known I'd need more than money to find my way. Known that true inheritance isn't counted in dollars, but in the quiet strength to stand straight when storms come. I took my first step down from those courthouse stairs, feeling lighter than I had in weeks. The morning breeze carried away the last echoes of camera shutters, leaving behind only the solid weight of brass against my palm and the certainty that some victories don't need to shout to be heard. The compass had guided me home, not to a house or a bank account, but to the man Mother always knew I could be. And that was worth more than all Carl's empires combined. I believe stories like this find us for a reason. If this one touched you, please subscribe. I share a new one every day. And tomorrow